We have to live in the real world and accomplish what we can to save lives. And I think that means freezing the conflict along the current battle line with the plan to start negotiations to figure out a way to get Ukraine back as much of its territory as possible.
Hello, this is Victoria Derbyshire in the Ukrainecast studio.
And this is Vitaly Shevchenko, also in the Ukrainecast studio.
And let's introduce you to Fred Fleitz. Hello to you, Mr. Fleitz.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I wonder if you could tell our listeners around the world a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm vice chair of a new think tank in Washington, the America First Policy Institute. We were set up after President Trump lost the last election, and we've been promoting and defending his unique approach to government, both domestic policy and foreign policy.
And importantly, you co-authored last year, along with Keith Kellogg, President Trump's Ukraine and Russia envoy, a policy document with proposals to end the war in Ukraine. And obviously, Keith Kellogg is going to be an absolute central player in any negotiations, any peace talks that may come down the track.
One of the key points, key thoughts that you put forward was this idea that a ceasefire needs to be sought and negotiated settlement. And the United States would continue to arm Ukraine and strengthen Ukraine's defenses, and I quote, to ensure that Russia will make no further advances. Can you talk us through that specific point? Does that mean that as part of a deal, what Vladimir Putin would get is the part of Ukraine that he currently occupies?
I think Putin has concerns about Ukraine joining NATO and an American or European military presence in Ukraine. I don't think that's a legitimate concern. The U.S. and its allies have no ambitions to invade Russia or to interfere in Russia, but Putin doesn't see it that way. And that's why we suggested that NATO membership be postponed for a set period of time. My personal position is 25 years. I think that's a good concession to offer to Russia. And we're not giving up very much because I don't think the unanimous vote is there to add Ukraine as a member to NATO in the near future. So I know this isn't going to be pleasing to Zelensky and to the Ukrainian people, but I don't think that's a lot to give up to end the war. And this would be a sort of security assurance by making sure that Ukraine has the weapons to defend itself so Russia doesn't use a ceasefire to rearm and simply invade again.
But in terms of territory, do you think, well, it's fair or realistic to talk in terms of who keeps what, at least for the foreseeable future, just to make the killing stop?
We call for freezing the conflict along the current battle lines, and Ukraine does not give up its territorial claims. Ukraine does not give up its demand to get back all of its territory. That just isn't going to happen in the immediate future.
We've got a voice note here from one of our regular listeners. She is called Olga, and she's a teacher who lives in Carson in southern Ukraine, near the front line, as you know. And we asked her what she thought about the prospect of freezing the war along its current lines.
I'm sure that if the war freezes at the front line, it will be just a temporary stop of the fire. Though, if it lasted for a long time, we would not only lose territory, but people. Our children are trained to be Russians and hate Ukraine. Young men are enlisted to their army. What will happen in few years? I think that it is not the decision which will bring peace to Ukraine.
Do you understand that worry that just pausing it, freezing it, means it's not really over and Russia can come back?
This will be a very difficult solution for the Ukrainian people to accept. This war has been brutal. And I mean, if in a perfect world, we would put Putin and his generals and officials in the Russian government on trial for war crimes, but we can't accomplish that. And if there was a way to get back all of Ukraine's territory, I think we should do that. I actually know a way to do that. we could send NATO troops in, send British troops in. I don't think the British people want to send the British army into Ukraine. I know the American people don't want the U.S. army to go in because there's no willingness to do that. Another approach has to be found. And I know it's distasteful, but we have to live in the real world and accomplish what we can to save lives. And I think that means freezing the conflict along the current battle line with the plan to start negotiations to figure out a way to get Ukraine back as much of its territory as possible.
Do you think Vladimir Putin, well, as part of these negotiations, would want a bit more than just a delay to Ukraine's NATO membership? Because I'm sure you'll agree that a huge reason for why he started his special military operation is control of Ukraine as a state and a nation, as well as territory.
There's a lot of debates on why Putin invaded Ukraine. It's really a tragedy. I don't think his reasoning made any sense. I don't doubt that there will be pretty stiff demands by both sides if talks start. But at a minimum, we have to stop the fighting and begin peace talks, which may go on for many years. We may be looking at a situation similar to the Korean Peninsula with an armistice that may be in place for a long time before we have a final solution. We know in North Korea, it's been 75 years now, and there still is no peace treaty.
Mm. And of course, President Zelensky would have to sell that to the Ukrainians. And you can imagine some Ukrainians going, we're never getting this land back.
Well, I mean, to be realistic, American military aid for Ukraine is not going to continue indefinitely. And if the Ukrainian government does not agree to peace talks, and I think ultimately ceasefire, they're not going to have the support they need to hold off the Russian army. So I think there will be an incentive to accept this, and I know many of them aren't going to be happy about it. But if there's another way, I'd like to hear it.